whenever people talk about like Hitler, you have to realize behind everybody, whether you consider them evil or not, there's a person back there, and there's a person back there that, even though they might have really flawed ideas, they have an intent to do something, and in their mind they're doing something great, it but to everybody else they seem crazy. And he was crazy, his ideas and evil, yes. But if you ever saw this documentary about this guy who was trying to have this he was going to have this great vacation set up for rich people. And he said there would be townhouses, everybody would have their own townhouse, and then they would have like furnished townhouses. There would be models, there would be jet skis, and it would be fun. And then they would have like live music and performances and all this stuff. The name of the movie has the word fire spelt with a Y. So look it up. It's on Netflix. And the guy who came up with this was not a very good business person. He was really an entrepreneur, and he was not a very good entrepreneur. He was a really very flawed person, and he never thought about the logistics. The logistics was the thing that failed him in this whole thing, and logistics are really crucial to any kind of idea, any plan that involves um, an event or something happening with a country or anything. And logistics, I believe, are the reason why this failed. And also, I think that Hitler thought in his mind that he could displace the Jews probably without killing them. He's half Jew, by the way. Um, Probably displaced the Jews, and what ended up happening was he probably thought to himself that, well, I need to keep them in Germany, but I'm going to displace them. He probably had no idea how many Jews there were, and how hard it would be to come up with the housing to displace them into a concentration camp or something like that. He probably started making concentration camps, but had no reason to kill the people. And originally, it probably came to that because he was trying to control the Germans' perception of what he was doing, and so he he just moved them into concentrations and killed them. Over time, people started to realize that this guy didn't really know what he was doing, and that gets perceived over time as being evil. But it may be that he had an intent to not do good, but to do different, to try to fix what he thought was a problem. He had in his perspective, he had a good, and this is relativism, by the way, is that you develop your good based upon, you got these people that say there's no truth, everybody has their own truth. Well, that's relativism, and that's the idea is that what's true for you might not be true for somebody else. And um, but the Bible really talks about what is true, and there are a lot of people who won't believe it, but it's because it works against their selfishness, because it's very selfless what the Bible teaches. And Hitler was very selfish, and that selfishness led him to evil. And selfishness, um, there are a lot of there's selfish people that are led to the idea that they can control the world, and when they try to, they fail, and it happens a lot. and he was just one of the ones who just ended up doing it worse than anybody. There was a lot of hate in what he was doing that just made it worse. That he thought he knew how to fix things for Germany, and he didn't. Um, but he also constructed a mythology, I had heard, to try to get the Germans to believe in themselves because they didn't believe in themselves. And so he was taking a population, and we in America, we can see this in the people that used to be middle class but end up being poor, and they're wanting to get the America back that they knew in the 50s, you know, when people had a job and they had somewhere to go, and they're trying to get back to some great period. And Trump took advantage of that the same way that Hitler took advantage of that by getting everybody unified in going against what Hitler, in Hitler's case, evil was the Jewish people. They were the ones that were causing the evil. So he got the Germans against the Jewish people and made the Jews into the scapegoat, you know. And so they he was sending them of German out of the cities into these concentration camps. But the Germans didn't really know what was going on. They just thought that he was pushing them outside of the city. He was pushing them into other areas of the country, when in reality, he was pushing them into concentration camps. And it's possible, if you give Hitler the benefit of the doubt, even though it doesn't sound like a good thing to do, um, just keep in mind that there are people that can end up in such situations by not considering the logistics of what they're trying to do, and may end up killing people. But then in the essence of trying to control perception, this is exactly what China is doing, where they hold stability as paramount. They're killing people in order to maintain this false perception that they're doing well, when they're really doing bad, and they're doing a lot of evil. And that is because originally the government was set up to work, and then it started failing in many different ways, and they're still trying to make this work, and it can't work. It just won't work. It will just end up being a more evil government with time. And um, and you'll realize that there are people that are human, they're human characteristics, good characteristics, people in some part of their of of them, they have a need to have a simple life. And Hitler in his last day, um, had a marriage ceremony with the girl that he was in love with. They had a celebration. They drink wine and they celebrated. Then they all took cyanide pills because they didn't want to face the music. And they didn't have a belief system. They probably had no belief system. They didn't believe in hell or heaven. And whenever you don't believe in hell or heaven, this is what will happen to you if you try to control anything, because you won't believe there's any consequences to that stuff. And I'm not saying there aren't consequences. I'm saying that there are people who don't believe there are consequences, and there's a greater potential for evil to occur when you think that there's nothing above you or below you. You know, when you think there. I mean, think about this. If everything developed through evolution, why is everything more symmetrical than asymmetrical? I mean, why are blood cells formed in the way they are? Their aerodynamic properties. The toroid is a perfect aerodynamic. Um, Everything's perfect. Everything's symmetrical. If there was no creator and this is all random chance, everything would be asymmetrical. I mean, if you go and you test um, evolutionary algorithms in AI environments, you will find that a lot of the things that develop are not symmetrical, they're asymmetrical. They have imperfections in them. They don't make sense from a design point of view. And also, there isn't any, like for nature, there isn't any simple formulas to describe all the organisms in their nature. Well, they can't even come up with a simplification for the way our body works. They have certain things that are true, but there's stuff that they still don't know. Like most of the doctors don't understand the digestive tract, which is a completely different organism from the internal organs that are protected from that digestive tract. If your digestive system was to get an ulcer, it would go into your body and eat out all your other organs. And they don't understand. Uh, there's nobody who really understands how an organism that eats stuff got in contact with an organism that mobilizes to find stuff to eat. They're even in the simplest form, they don't. There's the statistics are really against that ever occurring, and so just keep in mind. The other thing I was going to talk about was Anne Frank, who was put into a really small living situation to avoid being caught by the Germans, um, by the Nazis. Um, she didn't survive, but she had a heroic spirit, and this is what everybody recognizes, and the reason why her diary is read. It was a diary that nobody would, you don't expect people to read other people's diaries, but the Bible is there's some parts of the Bible where you're basically reading Paul's letters. You're not you're basically dumpster diving for somebody else's letters, and you're reading the letters and getting inspiration from it. And Anne Frank had her diary and probably never expected anybody to read it. And it that brought a lot of inspiration. It gave people a view on what it's like when you get cooped up into some place for a long period of time. With the how you deal with how you deal with the situation. And she dealt with the situation a very heroic and a very positive approach, and not to worry about the future, but to always be hopeful. And you can look at her story and you can realize that that's the kind of spirit that everybody needs to have whenever they're in situations where they really don't feel they have any control, even in jail. You can understand how she was able to get outside of the limitations of the cell she was in. Everybody lives in a prison or a cell of their life that they want to get out, but um, part of the thing is if you were to get out, what would you do, and where would you go, and whether you ever do get out of it, is it really that important to really go for it, but to have the spirit that you would do these things and that you hope for them, but you don't like um, you don't escape the situation. You don't want to evaporate, like I was talking about people in San Francisco who were evaporating to the hills to look for gold. Um, the best situation to have is a stable situation, but you're not going to get stability from the government. You're going to get stability from looking out for each other, and that's the only way to get stability. The government's not going to give it to you. Communism's not going to give it. Socialism, capitalism, none of that is going to really get you stability. What's going to give you stability is looking out for each other.